I'm State Representative Mike Verb of Montgomery County. I just want to introduce some of my colleagues that are here from the House and the Senate. Senator Rafferty is here with us. Chairman Adolph, who is our Appropriations Chairman. Bill is from Delaware County. Representative Topol, Quigley, Stevens, and Harper, Chairman Harper, are here with us from Monco. And Representative Jamie Santor of Delaware County and Representative Tom Killian are here with us as well. We'll be brief with the heat, but we're Republicans, we can stand the heat. And right now that heat has been America Works mail pieces hitting our members' houses, distorting the truth and putting a shield over what the agenda of this governor's tax increases and how they're going to impact our taxpayers, our constituents. So we thank you all for coming out today. At this point, I'm going to turn over the podium to Senator John Rafferty.
Thank you, Mike. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not running for election this year, nor any of my colleagues here. We were elected last year, along with a guy named Tom Wolf, and we were elected to govern. And that means we're to put aside bipartisan differences and try to arrive at just conclusions for a fair and reasonable budget here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I take very seriously the June 30th, July 1st deadline, the beginning of the fiscal year. I don't look at it as a marker. I look at it as a date we're supposed to have a budget passed. We were negotiating with the governor, our negotiation team, the House negotiation team. We weren't able to come to a conclusion with the governor, so we passed a budget that increased line items of dollars in certain areas over and above what the governor himself had proposed, and funded 4 state police classes, increased education funding, and increased funding for our veterans. It's something I have never seen in Harrisburg. This governor decided to veto the entire budget, not blue line one item or 2 items or 6 items, but the entire budget. So our Commonwealth is not functioning with a budget in place. A budget that was passed in good faith, knowing negotiations would come further down the road. But we can't negotiate with a constant campaign barrage aimed at members of our delegation. The campaign stopped, Governor. It's time to get to the budget table now and get a budget for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Our negotiation team in the Senate, and I know Chairman Adolph will talk about it in the House, they have some leeway. They know how far we can go. We can't go for the extravagant tax increases that were proposed, but we do have some wiggle room with which to negotiate with the governor. So it's time, Governor Wolf, to get to the budget table with the negotiation teams from the Senate and the House, both sides of the aisle, and get a budget passed and signed by himself so that the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania can once again effectively operate as a state government. Now it's my pleasure to introduce to you the chairman of the Appropriations Committee in the House of Representatives and one of the key players in our budget process from Delaware County, Representative Bill Adolph.
Thank you very much, Senator Rafferty, and I want to thank Representative Mike Verb for organizing this. And I really mean that because it's hard to negotiate up in Harrisburg at the negotiating table, and then as you arrive home, you think you're in the middle of a campaign. And I say that because almost starting 2 months ago, on a weekly basis, we've been receiving these glossy mailers, okay, saying how wrong the Republicans are. And Senator Rafferty and Representative Verb have mentioned that we also got elected. We have large majorities in the House. After the governor's proposal to increase spending by 16% in the first week of March, we held 3 weeks worth of appropriations hearings. We brought in as cabinet members. We asked questions, tough questions. Why? Why do we need a $4.6 billion tax increase in this fiscal year? An $8 billion tax increase in the calendar year 2016? The only answer that we heard for those 3 weeks, and the only answer that I continue to hear when I'm sitting at the negotiating table, is that we have to accept this whole budget. The governor, ladies and gentlemen, has not moved 1 iota. I have sat in numerous meetings with his chief of staff, with the budget secretary. They have not moved off this massive tax increase. What these mailers have done, to I'm sure Governor Wolf's surprise, is that it has energized our base, the people that put us in Harrisburg, people that I know personally, that you see at local restaurants, that I do tax returns for, that I coach their football teams for. They trust us going to Harrisburg for some type of balance. This governor is using campaign tactics that I've never seen before. I've heard over $1 million, either in TV ads, radio ads, or mailers throughout the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. They're all identical. We're all wrong, he's right, according to these mailers. Well, I have news for the governor. You cannot veto a budget that increases education spending by over $300 million, that makes its pension contribution of $1.7 billion, and increases human services for those Pennsylvania residents that need it the most. If there was items that he disagreed with, he could have blue lined them responsibly. And we'd have been negotiating on those blue line items separately. This is the first governor in over 40 years that has blue lined the entire budget, the full veto. And he did it hours after we put the budget address and the budget on his desk. He did not review that. I challenge him. There's $13 billion worth of line items that we either increase the spending or equal to. 247 line items of the 400 line items on the budget. He was wrong for vetoing the entire budget. It was on time. It did not increase taxes for the hardworking people of Pennsylvania, and we're determined to get this worked out at a reasonable time. But I resent coming home every week and seeing nothing but campaign-style literature sent into my district saying how wrong and what we're doing against education and the Human Services Department. A wrong tactic, and I believe it's going to backfire on this governor. It's my privilege to introduce a good friend and colleague of mine for many years in Harrisburg, Representative Kate Harper from Montgomery County. Thank you.
Good job.
Thank you very much. I am State Representative Kate Harper from Bluebell, Montgomery County. And I also want to note that Representative Dan Truitt is here. Dan, wave, came up. You know what? I think we're having the wrong debate in Pennsylvania. Here's one of the 5 mailers that my district got. Kate Harper standing in the governor's way. So the debate we're having is the voters elected the governor, and the voters elected a Republican House and Senate. Can't we all just get along? And that's the wrong debate. The debate we ought to be having is it will cost about $3 to $4 billion, that's a B, to balance the governor's budget. What taxes do the Pennsylvanians we represent feel okay with us raising or imposing? We're not having that debate, and we need to have that debate, because the governor's budget depends on going up 20% in the personal income tax, 20%. It calls for going up 40% in sales tax revenue. The rise is only 6 to 6.6%, but we're going to be taxing a whole bunch of things we never taxed before. A whole new list of products and a whole new category of services, so that everything from diapers to caskets will be taxed at 6.6%. And every service from daycare to funerals will be taxed at 6.6%. We need to be having a debate about whether we're okay with that. When I explain to people that that's what the governor's budget costs, are they okay with me voting for that? They're not okay with me voting for that. The other things we'll be taxing are raising cigarette taxes and other taxes, and in addition to that, raising the Marcellus shale tax to the highest tax in the land. I personally don't have a problem voting for a higher Marcellus shale tax. I had my own bill introduced in January before this governor even made his budget proposal. But I'll tell you, I'm not comfortable taxing people on the services they get at assisted living places. Wow. You add 6.6% to the average cost of assisted living, and you're talking $500 or $600 a month. It's as if you stayed 13 months and only got 12 for it. I'm not comfortable with that. Are the rest of the Pennsylvanians that I represent okay with that? No. I had exactly one person tell me it was okay to tax people in continuing care retirement communities because they can afford it. That person did not live in a continuing care retirement community. I have not had a single person who is a senior on a fixed income trying not to burden their kids by living in a continuing care retirement community say it was okay to add $400 or $500 a month to their service fee they're paying every month. So we're having the wrong debate in Pennsylvania. It's not about all of us getting along, although I got to tell you, these mailers are not helping us all get along. The debate should be about what taxes are we okay raising and how high. And if we're not okay voting for a 20% increase in the personal income tax and taxing things we've never taxed before with a sales tax, then we ought to be able to say that and come up with a budget that doesn't need a $4 billion tax increase. Now, to share the podium with me, I'd like to invite my colleague, also from Montgomery County, Representative Todd Stevens. Todd? Oops, sorry.
Thank you, Kate, and certainly thank you, Mike and Bill, for putting this together. I think it's important that we come out here and do a couple of things. First of all, we need to set the record straight. The governor is not being honest with Pennsylvanians if he only talks about a drilling tax. His proposal involves a whole lot more than just a drilling tax. As you heard, it involves increased income taxes, increased sales taxes, increased bank taxes, increased tobacco taxes, along with that drilling tax. As a matter of fact, the Independent Fiscal Office found that every income group in Pennsylvania would pay more under the governor's proposal. Let me say that again. Every income group in Pennsylvania would pay more under the governor's proposal with all these taxes that he's proposed. That's probably why it failed 193-0 when it was put up for a vote. Unanimously, his budget proposal was rejected. Look, I know a little bit about families. I have two kids. I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. When you start talking about added taxes on diapers, on daycare services, that gets my attention. And frankly, working families across Pennsylvania should not have to foot the bill for this governor's budget. The second reason we're here, frankly, and it's been alluded to by a couple of my colleagues, is to let the governor know if he wants, quote, government that works, then he needs to stop throwing temper tantrums at the legislature, which is all he's done. The bottom line is, again, as a father of a 3- and a 1-year-old, I know a little bit about what a temper tantrum looks like, and that's what this governor does when he doesn't get everything he wants. What happened when his tax proposal was rejected 193-0? When it was rejected unanimously and he didn't get everything he wants, he started mailing these. The 5 mailers that came into my district, right? His version of a temper tantrum. As was mentioned, how do you come to an agreement with the legislature if all you're doing is attacking the legislature? If we all need to work together, then let's stop the attacks, let's stop the temper tantrums, and let's come together for the people of Pennsylvania. His second temper tantrum came after we passed a no tax increase budget that increased funding for education. The bottom line is, he went ahead and vetoed that entire budget. That entire budget, including the 174 line items where we either met or exceeded the governor's proposal. And there's 2 in particular in that budget that really, I think, deserve attention, and frankly, the governor ought to be ashamed about vetoing. rape crisis centers and domestic violence programs. He proposed a 10% increase in both of those line items, and I was thrilled to see that. As many of you know, I was a prosecutor in this building for almost 10 years before coming to the State House. I know how valuable those programs are to our victims. But the bottom line is, and our budget, by the way, included a 10% increase in both of those line items. Yet he vetoed it. So you know what that means? That means right now, thanks to his veto, rape crisis centers and domestic violence programs in Pennsylvania have zero funding, thanks to the governor. Zero. I was emailing with a number of them this morning. They told me that depending on how long this goes, they'll have to lay off staff, they'll have to cut back hours. Some of them will even have to close down in the event that this impasse lasts for too long a period of time. Well, Mr. Governor, that's not government that works for those who need it most. Those who need it most need you to act like an adult. Stop throwing temper tantrums, come to the table, and let's negotiate a reasonable budget for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I'll say to you the same thing that I say to my 3-year-old when he has a temper tantrum. When you're ready to have a rational discussion, I'll be right here and we can work together to solve the problem. And the reality is, it's time for Governor Wolf to stop throwing temper tantrums and work with us so that we can have a government that works for all of Pennsylvania. Thank you. Oh. Next up, I'd like to introduce my good friend from Delaware County, Tom Killian.
Thank you, and I'll be brief. They pretty much covered a lot of what we wanted to hit today. You saw the political mailers that have come out of Washington, D.C. attacking us in our home districts. And the governor seems to want to involve the public in a discussion about the budget. But if you look at any one of these mailers, look at any one of them, all 5 or 6 of them have come out of Washington, D.C., not one mentions the personal income tax or the sales tax. Not one. They have pictures of oil rigs and that we're in the pocket of the drillers. And nothing could be further from the truth. But he doesn't talk about where the bulk of the taxes are coming from. You heard over the next 2 years the tax increases will be in the area of $12 billion. $12 billion in new taxes. Only 3% of that is coming from the drillers. 3%. That means 97% is coming out of the pockets of hardworking Pennsylvanians. Money out of their pockets. We've all heard of the shell game, where a con artist moves things around and takes your hard-earned money. Well, the governor's playing a shale game. He's using shale to convince us this is a painless tax. It's not painless. 97% is going to come out of our pockets. And I have another question for the governor. This firm in Washington, sending these mailers out in Washington, D.C., called America Works, we have lobbying laws here in Pennsylvania. You must register to lobby at least 30 days before you begin lobbying. These mailers begin in early June. This company did not register as a lobbyist until July 1st. They've spent $750, maybe even $1 million on TV, radio, and mailers. Well, was that a gift to the governor in violation of his own gift ban? I join my colleagues saying, let's get this done. We've negotiated budgets when we had a Democratic governor before. We could do it again. But he must come to the table and stop sending out the attack pieces. Thank you. And I'd like to introduce my colleague, Representative Topol.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Marcy Topol. I represent the 147th, which is Western Montgomery County. And I'm not going to go through a lot of the numbers. You've heard them from my colleagues who are experts in that field. But I do want to talk about the personal side of the governor's proposal. I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth. I was raised without a lot of fluff. My parents worked hard, and they did the best they could for my 3 brothers and myself. In hindsight, my austere upbringing helped me understand the struggles of many of my own constituents. I have lived paycheck to paycheck, and I've gone years without a vacation and had to work multiple jobs to make ends meet. I'm very fortunate now that I get to serve in the House of Representatives, but I do not, nor do I ever want to forget where I came from. The money we take from our citizens is real money. When we ask them to give more, it could be the difference between making it one more day, one more week, one more month. Every day I hear from folks who ask us to hold the line financially. There are no savings and no trust fund for them. Our governor may never have walked in their shoes, but he should hear their cry. We all want good schools, safe communities, good health care. In this budget we sent to the governor, we have balanced those needs with the ability of our constituents to pay for them. A request to increase taxes at historic levels ignores those who have to pick up the tab. His proposal increases taxes on every single income level. We must say no. In fact, all 193 House members said no. Mr. Wolf may drive a Jeep, but he doesn't have to. He hasn't had to worry about which bill to pay, which one to defer. The persona that he's created is warm and fuzzy, but his proposal is not. It is cold, unfeeling, and a cruel tax grab from many who cannot simply afford to pay it. The mail pieces that have been dropping in our districts have been soundly rejected. My office has been flooded by calls asking me to stand firm and reject the governor's budget. Instead of working toward real solutions that fund state services, reform our pension system, and get us out of the liquor business, the governor has chosen to continue his campaign rhetoric using DC lobbying firms to do his bidding, playing the schoolyard bully. He cannot hold out an olive branch in one hand and a sledgehammer in the other. If he continues to use this tactic, negotiations cannot move forward. If he has nothing to do with these mail pieces, as he tells people when they call his office, and I ask him to denounce them, to work with the legislative leaders to come to a consensus on this budget, one that really works and also respects our taxpayers. Thank you. I would also like to introduce my colleague, Jamie Santor from Chester County. Delaware, I'm sorry, I even knew. Sorry,
all good.
Jamie.
Thank you. Jamie Santor from Delaware County. I too will keep it very brief. I come from a middle-class neighborhood, as do many of my colleagues. The governor has made it very open that he's donating his salary back. I don't have that luxury, and nor do the majority of Pennsylvanians. And every dollar that the governor wants to take out of our pockets is less that we can afford to live on. And I'm not willing to do that to Pennsylvanians. I'm not willing to do that to the people of the 163rd District. I am willing to increase education spending. I have been very open about my willingness to do a severance tax on gas drillers. And I not only am willing to, but I voted for a property tax reduction bill that was dollar for dollar, unlike the governor's plan for property tax reduction that is not. I want to keep money in the pockets of Pennsylvanians so that we can keep our economy going. The governor's plan does not do that. It does not address that. The governor's plan, the analysis shows over 2 years of $12 billion. Everybody keeps referring to the first year, but if you truly pay attention to it, it's going to increase to $12 billion in tax increases. Pennsylvania cannot afford that, and I will not support that. I do support a lot of the initiatives that I just mentioned to increase funding to education, to decrease property taxes, and I will do it by working, as part of it will come from a severance tax on drillers. I am willing to do that. I'm willing to put up the tough votes, but I'm not willing to go look for $12 billion to get $400 million in increased education funding like the governor wants. I am honored to introduce my friend and my colleague from Montgomery County, Tom Quigley.
Thank you. My name's Tom Quigley. I'm the state representative in the 146th district up in the Limerick, Pottstown, Royersford area. You know, a lot has been said here about these mail pieces and some of the things that they're detailing in there. And a couple of things when you dig deeper into the governor's plan, particularly this shale tax plan. All throughout the campaign, we heard it was about education. When you take a look a little deeper, you can see that one of the big things there that's objectionable to many of us is $55 million a year used to pay down a borrowing plan, $675 million for job creation, alternative energy programs, that sort of thing. So again, $55 million for the next 20 years will be taken off the top to go to these borrowing programs. And for those who have been around as long as I have, most of these borrowing programs are nothing more than giant pools of walking around money or given out to firms that are favorable to the administration. So again, when you dig deep into the governor's plan, same thing with the property tax. He talks about raising the income and the sales tax to go towards property tax reduction. When you look at the details, the income tax increase simply goes into the gaming fund and is driven out through the homestead exclusion. We all know how great that worked out for many of our property taxpayers. part of the sales tax, going from 6 to 6.5 and expanding the base, all goes to the general fund for increased spending. So again, the governor portrays himself as a reasonable person, is just trying to help the property tax owner using the shale tax to pay for all our education purposes. When you dig deep into the details here, you can see that it is really a shale game, as my friend from Delaware County said. So I call on the governor to come back to the negotiating table. Again, as many of people have said here, these mail pieces are simply stirring up our base. The calls to my district have been overwhelming for me to stand up to the governor. So the governor has to realize that although he says he received a mandate, the mandate had more to do with the previous governor than it had to do with people being in love with his proposals. With that, I'd like to introduce my good friend from Chester County, Representative Dan Truitt.
Good afternoon. When Governor Wolf came into office, he said he was going to be a new kind of governor. And as a businessman, and knowing that he was a businessman, I was optimistic that that might actually be the case. And I told him in a private conversation, I said, Governor, if you're going to let your instincts as a business person guide you, I think that you and I will get along okay. But I don't know what kind of a business person, when they're trying to negotiate a deal with somebody, sends out mailers to their friends and family and relatives telling them what an awful person they are and telling them things about them that aren't even necessarily true. He sent 3 rounds of mail into my district saying that I put gas drillers ahead of children. But the reality is I'm a co-sponsor on a bill to enact a reasonable severance tax on the shale industry. And when it comes to children and education, his proposal would actually increase or actually add sales taxes to college textbooks and room and board, which in my district, I represent Westchester University, would cost the average student about $400 a year. And these are students who often they choose a state school because they don't have a whole lot of money to spend on their education. And here we're going to whack them for another $400. So his mailing against me was misleading, if not an outright lie. And I don't consider those the actions of a legitimate businessman. And I hope that he will now let his instincts as a businessman take over, that he'll come to the table and negotiate with my friend and colleague from Delaware County and come up with a plan for a real budget that works for everybody. So thank you very much.
Chairman Adolph and I'll take any questions. Any questions? We wanted to see you guys come out here and sweat like we do. It's 5 counties, and we're getting the mailers. Another one hit today. And we thought this would be a good place to get together. I mean, obviously, press availability and access. And, if we go to the Capitol, we do it with the Capitol Press. And while they do a good story, not all that messaging gets down to the level of our constituents. So it seemed to be a good central point for us to pull together and be out here today to share the message that behind this argument of Marcellus is several billions in tax increase proposals by the governor. There's essentially been 2 waves of mailers. The first one was after the voting down his budget, which when we say unanimous, we mean every single Democrat, including their leadership, voted against the governor's budget as was submitted as an amendment. So it started there, and then there's another wave here as we passed the budget and left town. Anybody else?
That's a great question. We put together a budget that had liquor privatization in it, about $220 million a year for the next 15 years. We also had some transfers from state agencies that had excess reserves, close to $50 million. And we had about $500 million in revenue over and above what was projected. So it was not necessary. Okay, and obviously, many of us have traveled around the state and seen all the jobs that this industry has created. But the situation is that because of the lower gas prices, and that's worldwide, you're not getting the type of money that the governor continues to talk about, $1 billion. My office has done an analysis that after you pay the local impact fee of $220 million, the next calendar year will only leave about $100 million left over. So we put in $220 million from the liquor privatization, which is more than double than what you would be getting from the shale. So this is the type of conversation I thank you very much for being here, because we do not have the ability, we don't have the pulpit that the governor has, nor the friends in D.C. to get this word out. So thank you very much.
I think on that question of Marcellus, I mean, the bigger point to us is that that's what's in these mail pieces. What's not in these mail pieces is the grab out of the people's wallets at home. And we would hope that the press would report the rest of the story. There's no question Marcellus industry has been probed from many corners of this state for a shale tax. We did the impact fee. That's not enough. Now we want a tax. We can deal with it with the Marcellus issue if it ever comes back to the table. But the real reality is, whether it's diapers or caskets, whether it's your newspapers or any other services that are offered to our constituents, they're all going to be taxed to fill in the remaining gap of revenue. And that revenue is also going towards education. Anything else?
Those numbers are higher than the shale tax.
I'm sorry, who are you? We'll get to you afterwards. We're dealing with the press right now. Thanks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.